See that. And we're here.
Hello.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Monday Night Generational Change.
I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and
What?
we're changing the studio very, very soon.
Very soon.
In fact, we're not only changing the studio, we're changing our entire process, I guess you would say.
Are we? No, I mean we're not changing
Well,
the process, but
we're
adding some elements.
I think we're going to be seeing more traction. At least that's the goal. The goal is to ultimately get more foot traffic, not 3 people on YouTube, 5 people on Twitter.
And we don't want it to be relying on YouTube. That's the other thing.
That's
I
true.
want people on Patreon, and so we are expanding our presence into TikTok. That is our upcoming plan. You will see us on TikTok.
So
whatever nonsense that is, I don't even know what it is.
It'll be an interesting experiment, but I think one that will probably benefit us much because we're not doing enough to drive traffic to our show when we go live, and we're definitely
have really
suppressed.
good content, and we have good content. So it's like we're actually
bragging about our work.
No. I'm bragging
You're not
about.
supposed to brag about.
I'm not. I'm bragging about the guests we get on our show, and I'm bragging about the content that we cover. It's not like we're not getting good information and good people. So the fact that we don't get more views and more people is due to a couple of things. 1, marketing on our part, and 2, being suppressed on YouTube. But a lot of it is just that we have not put like 100% into marketing and promoting and doing all the stuff that we need to do. We don't do SEO stuff. There's stuff we could be doing to promote better. But no, we're not going to. YouTube is not our friend.
No, it's definitely not our friend, and we have to do a lot more to improve that fact.
Yeah.
So we're going to try a couple of different things. Hopefully with this individual who will be helping out, that will prove to be beneficial. I think that is cautious optimism, but I think we're in good shape.
And I think we want to expand the studio a little and be able to have in-studio guests. We have space to have like a nice couple of lounge chair, nice bar chair type things in here, cocktail chairs, and have another camera set up and have it so that we can actually have people over and have like just interesting in-house discussions and get, just more of a round table here where we're just talking and can even just address the chat, just keep it interesting. So I think we're going to try a few different things.
Hey, Kai. Okay, welcome. Good to see you.
Hi.
Mario.
I did. Were you not here? Hello for you, Mario.
Yes, and on that note, obviously, rest in peace to Stella Harris. Obviously, she was great. Talking about George using his body as an amusement park. I want you to go see a psychiatrist.
Oh my God.
She was 93.
Oh, did she died? She died?
Stella Harris.
She was so great.
She was.
Well,
they were all great. They all had their role to play, and there was a show that you look back on.
Her and Jerry Stiller were just like they stole every scene. Every scene that either one of them was in, it was
God,
them.
somebody stop this. Till you pin me, George. Festivus isn't over. I think you could take up George.
So speaking of festivities, we will be having a 420 celebration this year. And we're going to be going live. It's Wednesday, but we're going to be going live at 4 so that we can actually be in the 420 element. And it will be a nice revolving, rotating group of 420-ish guests.
Stoners.
I prefer cannabis users. It just sounds more sophisticated, but yes, that is our plan.
Well, the Democratic Party threw a little catnip at people today, just the other day by passing cannabis legalization in the House, but it'll probably get stalled.
It's not going anywhere.
And then if it gets to my desk, I'll just not have to pay it. Come on, man. I can't do that.
No, we have way too much invested in prosecuting nonviolent drug offenders.
And of course, if you're going to pass cannabis, you have to pass it with home grow. Otherwise, it's just going to get monopolized anyway. So,
I assure you people, I'll still have to pay and outsource. I suck. I've tried. It's not good. I had a plant. We watered it. We had
tried your best, but it didn't work.
Yeah, the college years were very interesting learning experience. But there are difference between male and female plants. That's all I've got to say. And if you have one and not the other, and it doesn't bear fruit, it's just never going to.
We'll see. So as you guys know, I am a very big sports guy, and of course, our first guest of the evening.
It all comes down to sports.
Well, sports is life.
Quit it,
especially
Lou.
somebody who happened to have played it professionally.
Settle.
That's always a good thing. And of course, baseball is the American pastime. And the gentleman who's coming on our show knows a thing or two about Dyersville, Iowa, which is Field of Dreams, where once a year around the 4th of July, two teams get together for a baseball game that is played at this historic spot. And I will say, as a baseball fan, probably the best regular season game of the entire baseball season was put. No hyperbole. Best game of the season was probably played right there between the New York Yankees, my team, and the Chicago White Sox, which the White Sox ended up winning in dramatic fashion. So, with that said,
here's my thoughts on.
You don't really give a damn.
No, I do. I love that movie. I love it for an entirely different set of reasons. I mean, the baseball thing was cute.
It's the dad-son story.
No, just the really being in touch with like the interconnectedness of the universe. It was very spiritual, that movie. I dug it. But anyway, what I have to say is I'm not going in the corn because I know what's in the corn, and there's a whole lot of snakes in the corn. Whole lot of snakes in the corn. So when I see people walking into the corn, I'm like, let me tell you something. And I'm thankful that there's snakes in the corn because they're eating the rodents that would otherwise be in the corn, but I don't want to go in the corn. It looks fun, but I assure you I've done
James Earl Jones with the hand, you know?
Right. Like it looks like it would be a fun thing. Like even to a little kid, like it looks like it would be fun to go there. It's not fun.
Okay.
I'm just saying. I've done a lot of things.
I'll tell you what is fun though. Iowa politics. It's a lot of fun. And
it's crazy.
And considering the article that just came out with the Gothamist today saying that the Democratic Party is considering moving the first in the nation primary out of Iowa.
Yeah, they can't handle it. They can't have it. They don't like that it's a caucus.
Do they not even understand how much the Iowa caucus benefits the Iowa economy? Like, do they not even take that into consideration?
No, they don't care. What they care about is that it's interfering and it's all populism and everything, and they don't want that.
Yeah, I guess
it's not like neoliberal elitist. It's actual working people.
Well, if anybody can speak to that, our first guest, J.G. Scholten, two-time candidate for the United States Congress and now candidate for the 1st District in the Iowa State House. J.D. Scholten, welcome to Generational Change.
Hey, good to be here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Awesome audio, my friend.
Thanks.
So, you want to get your little sports talk out of the way? Come up because you cannot help yourself.
Well, I've always maintained that baseball is the sport that is the best run. It's a sport where you could be playing at the biggest school in the nation, or you could be playing in a farming community in the heartland of the Midwest and have just as much of an opportunity to make it to the show. It's a very rare, if not the most rare things in regards to professional sports. If you want to be a professional basketball player, professional football player, the odds of making it to the professional level is like a 1.5% chance. Whereas in baseball, you have about a 10% chance, which is incredible to think that it's even that high of a number to make it into the farm system and then ultimately have a shot at the bigs. So if you could just talk briefly about what that experience is like and what baseball means to you, and certainly how it translates to just the complexities of life, because to me, baseball.
To you, sports is everything.
It is.
Life is sports.
Sports is life.
Well, so my father was a college baseball coach. He coached for over 30 years, and so for me, that's where I found my love of the game. Is the first being a bat boy, and then playing for him. I transferred to the University of Nebraska and got to play in the College World Series my senior year. Played in professional baseball, and then played in 7 different countries. And actually last summer, after 7 years of not playing, I played again for the first time. It just town team ball, but just had absolute blast and struck out several D1 players. And so as a 41-year-old at the time, I felt pretty proud of myself to still be able to have a little bit in this arm. But yeah, it's such a beautiful game. And I actually was able to go to the Field of Dreams game last year, and just
cool.
It was. I will say I actually wrote an op-ed because I had several issues with Major League Baseball and how they treat Iowans. Actually, that came out the day of, but Major League Baseball did get the Field of Dreams game right. It was gorgeous. The game itself was just epic and historic, and just was perfect.
I want to go to Iowa. There's actually a few things there that I've seen that look really, really cool, like nature-wise, like outdoor thing-wise, that look really inviting to me. So I dig it. And there's a lot of like granola hippie people there, I know, and there's a lot of like farm-to-table people there.
Yeah. So
which is a big deal. And you have a huge farming community, and I don't know what what part of Iowa? I mean, you're Sioux City.
Yeah, so I'm the Northwest, but
Okay.
that's one of my things is we really should create more of this. I think a lot of folks are starting to realize like 90% of the food that Iowans eat is imported. So even though you think of Iowa as agriculture and we grow all this stuff and it's amazing, we actually import 90% of our food, and it just all the policies and the way we go about things right now, it doesn't allow for adversity. It doesn't allow for flexibility or anything. And so that's one thing I'm really trying to push. The Farm Bill in DC is starting to be talked about now. That will I think they'll be voting for it at the end of next year or at some point in 2023. And so a lot of things are happening right now, and that's one thing that we're trying to push for.
I was going to ask you about that because I see that, you ran for Congress twice and now you're running for state, and the kind of things that we're talking about are mostly state things. And it's really important. I know here we have, the highest Democrat in our state position wise is our Commissioner of Agriculture. And that is a seat that is extremely powerful and has a lot of, it really matters, and people don't look at it as much. And so I was going to ask you, when you're running for state house, these are the kinds of issues that you really can have a real impact on for your agricultural community at that level.
Absolutely. One of the things, kind of my mindset on all this, I was just an average voter, and 2016 got me more engaged. I think it got a lot of people more engaged. And the last thing or right after the 2016 election, I went to visit my grandmother, who's my biggest inspiration in my life. And she told me, you got to take care of our farm. And we rented out to a family friend. So I wasn't just going to all of a sudden get on the tractor and start plowing the field or anything. But she passed away shortly after that. And then that just one thing led to another. And we launched this very humble congressional campaign that ultimately we ended up moving the needle 24 points, which is third most in the nation, and just really drew a lot of national attention at the end of that 2018 campaign. And so what I tell folks all the time is you have no idea the power that you have. And if you want change, it's easy to complain about things, but to go out there and actually do it, if you're willing to put in the work, the sky's the limit.
Can you talk about this art? I mean, obviously your campaign is very important, but this article that came out today from the Gotham is suggesting the Democratic Party is attempting to move Iowa out of the first in the nation. I think they did this back in 2019 as well, where they suggested that this state's not diverse enough and this and that. And all I'm thinking is, this is actually, with a few bumps in the road, a very well-run state. And the amount of economic impact that Iowans feel as a result of being first in the nation. I mean, with all due respect, we don't need to make, New York and New Jersey, as they suggested, the first in the nation. Those are not states that have a hard time bringing in, out-of-state commerce. But what first in the nation means every 4 years to Iowa economically probably couldn't even be measured in basic terms. Like, it really does mean a lot to the state. Can you talk a little bit about what that's all about?
Yeah, I think one of the things, there's no doubt we need some sort of reform to get it more inclusive and everything like that. But I think the thing that I really want to express is that if they do change it, the importance of what it means to be in a small state. One thing that we've seen traditionally in Iowa is that senators from large states don't do well. And the reason is the large states, you just win on TV ads. You don't get out there and have to convince people and meet people. We're spoiled in Iowa, absolutely. And I remember all the presidents coming through when I was a kid, and my parents bring me through all to see all the candidates and everything, and it's pretty special. But we take it serious. But think about Mayor Pete's campaign, and when he launched, no one knew how to pronounce his last name. And here's this mayor from South Bend, Indiana, and then for him to, I mean, they did everything right in their book, where there's this huge field. and they had the field program that was second to none. They ended up doing a lot of things that was pretty unique. And then I would argue the two best field programs, him and Bernie, were the two sides that ended up tying or winning at the end. And so I think that's the importance of what it needs to be, because we need to get candidates in front of voters. And the way we run campaigns, especially at the higher level, like I noticed this in the federal races, the DCCC has a way, and the DSCC has this way of the two groups that you talk to the most are donors and consultants. We need to get back to talking to voters, and that's that to me, the caucus or what we do in Iowa really allows at the highest level these presidential candidates to have to talk to voters. And that's the thing that I don't want to lose. And if it's another state, so be it. But we have to have an ability so it's not just television ads that take the cake.
I think that's probably one of the key reasons why they don't like it. They don't like the caucus states because of that. They actually have to work there. Mm-hmm. And I've always thought that. And those tend to be the states with, bigger space, rural spaces, and, they're not the kind of elitist bubble places.
Right.
And they actually have to talk to regular people. And it's also a lot of rural places.
It's also not going to make it'll make the Democrats look terrible, because if there's one thing I'm confident in saying, the GOP is not switching from Iowa. They know the value in being there. Yeah. And you see the work that they put in. I mean, Mike Huckabee won Iowa, Ted Cruz won Iowa. So it's like, yeah, you can see where it's one of those things where, from our perspective, the non-corporate uprising that is happening within the Democratic Party, they're trying to hold it off for as long as humanly possible. And if you could talk about what your experience is like currently running for the State House and what that would mean as being a representative in Northwest Iowa, how that dynamic changes versus going to at the federal level. What are some of the things that are very important to Iowans that you think you could obviously have an impact with?
So the importance of this seat to me, I have a good friend, Representative Chris Hall. This would have been his seat in redistricting, but he decided to retire. And so if you take Iowa, if you look at the map, there's an interstate that cuts right down the middle. And outside of the Des Moines, Ames area, everything in Western Iowa, we're down to 3 members of the House that are Democrats, and 2 of them just retired. And so with redistricting, and 2 of the seats gotten a little harder too. And so for me, running in this race is extremely important, because I just don't want just a Democrat who's just going to go down and is kind of a backbench person to go down there. And we need leaders. And I mean, in Western Iowa, there's not a lot of Democratic voices. And to me, if you look at the history of successful Democrats in Iowa, I mean, Harkin, and there's a gentleman named Berkeley Bedell who was a member of Congress for most of the 80s, and he passed away not too long ago. But he had this great re-election poster from, I think, 82 or 84 that said, "The 1% control the government. Does the 99% have a chance?" I have something to say about that. And I mean, that was from the early 80s. And so when I ended up meeting during the caucus, Senator Sanders, and I told him, "Hey, your 1%, 99% shtick, that's been around here for a long time." but Iowa just has this prairie populism, this deep roots in it. And yet, like, the kind of the powers that be, they don't like that. They want you to just be a dole, everything, whatever. And I think the huge part of our campaign was it shows the authenticity in saying, like, this is who we're fighting for. We just don't have this generic commercials that say the poll tested things. You got to run with your heart and run with who you are. And I think that's been a huge success in our campaigns. And in the state level here, right now, our state quarter has foundation in education on it. And there's bills down there that they want to put like cameras and teachers to make sure that teachers aren't saying the wrong things, and just the attack on public education. They're going to pass this voucher bill here, and just, people used to move to Iowa for our education. When I graduated from high school 20 years ago, or over 20 years ago now, we were first in the nation in education, and we're no longer there. And last year there was a U.S. News and rankings. They had a best public high schools, highest public high schools, and we were ranked 48th in that level, a percentage of high.
48th. We're generally 48th in education overall here, so we're very familiar with that location.
But yeah. I mean, we went from the mountaintops to the valley, and it just and they're just doubling down on this onslaught. And so, if there's ever a time that we can win back some seats and really show like, hey, no, this is not the Iowa we grew up in. It should be relatively soon here with these attacks.
It's a very good point. And I think one of the things we talk about all the time on our show is the importance of recognizing what the real issues of our time is. The biggest issue of our time is corporate special interests controlling our government. We constantly get distracted by these wedge issues and stories. You can take with it what you want with every attention that's been paid to our state's Don't Say Gay bill. But in the haste of that being talked about 24/7, there was an anti-solar bill that managed to get through with the help of the Democrats in Tallahassee, which is effectively, because our state is an energy monopoly with Florida Power and Light, which is owned by Nexstar Energy, which owns the pipelines up in your neck of the woods. Everything is connected. And so as a result, that all the air gets sucked out of the room. And one thing I'm sure as an Iowan you recognize is that there really isn't that big of a difference between a lot of us, whether we vote on the right or on the left or are independent. If we have an opportunity to have a real conversation that doesn't delve really into the wedge issues that separate us, if we focus on the meat and potato issues, farmers' rights, healthcare, the environment, living wage, most people agree on these things. And I'd like to think that you've probably experienced just as much on the trail.
So for the 4 years I ran for federal office, we were the district's 39 counties. It's pretty massive. We're the second most agriculture producing district in America. And I talked to farmers who would always vote for me and ones who will never vote for me and everywhere in between. And I led with antitrust and saying that there's a few multinational corporations that are dictating what's happening on the farm. And I didn't get pushed back one time. And it is something that people feel. That to me, I don't understand why that is not one of the most pressing issues in our day. It happens in everything. The reason we have ridiculous healthcare laws, it's monopolies. The reason in agriculture why farmers are getting squeezed on both the input side and the market side. And during COVID, there was the biggest spotlight on these meat packing plants. So they're charging the most for consumers they ever have in history for meat. They have the workers work in ridiculously tough situations for the same wage as when my family moved to Sioux City in 1984. So 4 decades of the same wage. And then you have the farmers being squeezed on this side. And so that's what I was trying to do, is talk about how consumers, how workers and farmers should all come together and build this coalition. And I mean, there's also in rural parts of Iowa and across the Midwest, grocery stores we're losing grocery stores. Dollar Generals are coming in, undercutting our so they don't sell fresh produce or fresh meat. I mean, that's going to rise healthcare costs when we don't eat healthy. And so all of this is intertwined. And I see what we saw last fall with the Striketober and all the unions fighting for workers' rights and everything. There's something out there. And then you have something that happens like Virginia, the Virginia election, the gubernatorial election, and we lose an economic populist message. And to me, when Democrats lose the economic populist message, we lose races. And that is something that to me as a Democrat, I struggle with, because I'm like, if you're going to lose that message, then why are you a Democrat?
And unfortunately, that is the big difference between where you are in the United States. You know, an Iowan Democrat, a Wisconsinite Democrat, a Minnesotan Democrat, you know, there is a huge difference versus Democrats that are in states like California, New York, even Florida.
South Florida.
Yeah, there's this propensity for their voices to be way too loud in the matter of discourse. And the people whose voices really need to be the loudest right now as we conclude this conversation are voices like yourself that are in support of things like what Chris Smalls and the Amazon workers just did the other day. I can only imagine the significance of what that would mean in the state of Iowa if there was like a real revitalization of the labor movement, because that to me is the future. If there is a future path for the non-corporate movement in the Democratic Party, it's through labor. That is the place. And I think as we continue to push on that narrative and recognize that we support working class initiatives without taking corporate special interest money, that is the message. And that is the message that resonates across the board, even with right-leaning independents or even GOPers.
It's just populism. It's populism.
Right. Yeah. Right. And when it comes back to like the state level stuff, we're giving huge tax breaks to these multinational corporations so we can cut public school funding. Makes no sense.
Right. No, it makes sense. It's absolutely working how it's intended to work. Like that's the thing. It's like you can sit around and be like, how don't they see this? Oh, they see it. You know, they see it. They're counting the dollars, but they see it just fine. I mean,
let me tell you something. The word has already gone out. They're already. I said that the day that that Chris Smalls and the Amazon workers unionized, I said, "Oh, Bezos is having a midnight meeting with all of his top board members.
This is
basically figure out exactly what they're going to do. They have already put the memo out. There is like certain words in the charter that you cannot say no under any circumstances.
Restrooms. You can't say restrooms.
Yeah, you can't say living wage. It's like I said, this is the fight. JD, how can people reach you? What is your website?
Well, also we need to ask you what the JD means, because Mario would like to know.
Okay, there you go.
My dad is James and my maternal grandfather is Dennis, and so they combined them for me. So James Dennis.
There you go. And what I also find it kind of funny that the last guest we had from Iowa was CJ Peterson.
Oh, CJ was great.
Right, but it was another initial name. I don't know. I just thought that's kind of funny.
And his last name is slipping me right now. I think it's Chris Morrison, head of the John. He was the UAW local John Deere strike workers. Awesome guy, and also awesome friend. Kimberly Graham, running for Polk County.
She's coming
attorney.
On. I saw her on the calendar.
So
super cool.
Cool.
So Iowa's got to go.
I gotta get there eventually. I'm not going in the corn. That's all I'm saying is I'm not going in the corn.
I thought that's all Western Iowa was, is corn.
No, but there is a lot of corn, and I'm not going in it.
Yes.
JT, that's not a stereotype, correct? There is a lot of corn.
There's a ton of corn.
Thank you. Okay, it's not like some wacky stereotype. There's a lot of corn.
I will say I've never seen a snake in. Not to say that they're not there, but I've never seen a snake in a cornfield. So.
Fair enough.
How can people send you help or sign up or whatever?
Yeah. So website is Scholten, my last name, SCHOLTEN FOR, Iowa. Scholten for Iowa is easy enough. And then you can follow me on all the social medias, just at JD Scholten. So.
Yeah, guys, check it out. Support, follow on social media. That helps. Even if you can't afford to give money, it always helps to, forward and share videos.
Retweets as good as $5, I think.
Yeah, it really is.
Every little bit counts. And obviously, we're very appreciative that you came on this evening.
You.
When is your primary?
On June 7th. I don't have an opponent, so that's nice.
Right. So you're really at the general.
And I don't have an opponent yet, but they can still do a nominating committee for it. So
okay, so they're not gonna just hand it to you.
I assume not, but you know what, we're gonna work our tails off.
Economic populists like you, pal.
I don't think so.
Well, and what we're doing is also we're trying to organize to lift up the seats around us too, and this state senate, the gubernatorial race and all that, and we're trying to push folks towards economic populism.
Good.
That's
running as a slate is the way to do it. We had Oh my God, what's her name? Rhode Island. Cynthia Mendez, who's running for lieutenant governor in Rhode Island, and they're running as a slate for like every position on the board. They've got like 50 people that are running for their state house on this slate with a governor and lieutenant governor. And it's like the power in the numbers is impressive. So it's not a bad, it's the way to go.
The Democratic Party will never operate like the GOP, but non-corporate progressives should operate like the GOP, because if they do, they will win.
You win.
And that's what, and that is one thing you could say, JD, especially being in a swing state like Iowa. The one big difference between Democrats and Republicans will win by any means necessary, as long as they win. That is all that matters to their party line. Respect, don't agree, but respect. And that's what it's all about. So guys, give them a follow, give them some support if you can.
Thanks, JD.
JD, maybe we'll have a panel before the election in June. So all the best in the meantime, brother.
Bye.
Awesome. Thank you.
Take care, man.
So before we have Annelle come on, I have to address the photo in the graphic, because somebody asked about the photo in the graphic, which you asked about the photo in the graphic. Like, why did I use a black and white picture of Annelle? And I'm gonna, and she could hear this too, because this is why, okay? Because her headshot that you would find if you were just to type in her name is very lovely and very happy, and she's very smiley and very colorful. And when I put that picture next to the words genocide in Yemen, it didn't go. It just didn't look right. It looked a little strange. So I found another picture of her. That's why. It's just a black and white picture. She is not a ghost. She is in fact real. That's what I was going to say.
Are you sure about that?
I am sure about that. So one of the things that we've talked about consistently for the entire time we've had a show is Yemen. And it's something that we bring up repeatedly. We talk about it. We don't always know everything. Like, we don't always have experts like we are having somebody tonight, but we know it's bad. And we know we're participating in creating a genocide in Yemen, and that needs to stop. We know that. So this is very important to me. This is something, and I think it gets overlooked by other things, which is fascinating, because how can you overlook a genocide? Like, that's the only thing we should not be overlooking. And yet nobody really talks about it. You don't hear about it on mainstream media. We know why. And so we know why. And so our guest is somebody who is a fellow at the Quincy Institute, which is, interestingly, there's Koch brother money supporting this institute. And yet this is a very factual study of what is going on in Yemen. And the reports from this are really very impressive.
The reality is, and listen, we have absolutely, everyone knows how we feel about the Koch brothers, but the one thing you can say about them is that they really are libertarian. They are not advocates for war. No. And that's, and civil liberties are two things that they are very strident about. So, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, for instance.
This is the report.
This is a very important story. We're going to be talking about the Yemen war numbers, Saudi escalation, and the U.S. complicity.
This is the report that Annelle wrote. She is the fellow at Quincy Institute, and she is very well versed in the war that is not being talked about. That is, I resist calling that a war as much as I call it a genocide.
It's a genocide. So Dr. Annelle Sheline, I believe I said that right, or Sheline?
Sheline.
Sheline?
Is it like feline, but Sheline? Bring her on, let's ask.
Well, welcome to Generational Change.
Hi.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
How do you pronounce your last name?
It does rhyme with feline.
See? So feline. Good. Very healthy respect for the feline.
I tried.
So I caught you on, I want to say, did I see you on with RJ, with RJ Eskow? Were you on? Yeah. Okay. Because I watched, and this is something we have talked about regularly. Like, we've addressed this, and I don't think people really understand the numbers. And I actually went ahead and took a couple of pictures of your graphs so that I could put them up, because people are very quick to play like partisan politics with this when we know that it's totally unrelated to that. But I thought the best thing to do would talk about the more recent history. So really back to, like, I guess it was 2014, 15, when whatever the most recent time period is where things have escalated and have changed, and start maybe talking about what happened there.
Sure. So the Saudi-led war on Yemen just turned 7 years old at the end of March, which is why RJ brought me on. And there were these efforts to try to reintroduce a war powers resolution, which members of Congress have committed to doing. Hasn't happened yet. Um, but before 7 years ago, the Houthis, who are a group of rebels that come from northern Yemen, had seized control of the capital and kicked out the president of Yemen, who has since been in exile in Saudi Arabia. And so the Saudis led a coalition of Arab governments to try to reinstate him. And the UN supported this, and the UN still supports this because at the time, initially, it seemed like the Houthis had derailed this democratic process that had come out of the Arab Spring. But as time has worn on, and as the consequences of what the Saudi led coalition are doing, as that has become clear, it's just evident that it's this horrifying, this is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. It has been called that for years. The UN designated it that years ago, and it's only gotten worse since then. In particular, right now with the crisis in Ukraine and with wheat prices going up all over the world because of both Russia and Ukraine being major exporters of wheat, this is also impacting humanitarian aid or just shipments of food that would otherwise come into Yemen. The price is going up. There's so much donor exhaustion on Yemen because it has been going on for so long. And as you said, people just don't really know much about it, or they just aren't really paying attention. So it's the one, I guess the one silver lining is there was this recent announcement of a truce. There is some question of to what extent is it going to last? Is it even lasting right now? There have been accusations on both sides that both sides have violated the terms of it. But we did see two ships. The Saudis did allow two ships into the port of Hodeidah, which is the main Yemen's main Red Sea port, which is controlled by the Houthis, which up until the past 24 hours or so, no fuel had gotten in for months, just exacerbating the ongoing crisis in Yemen that has had no fuel. So cars unable to run, generators unable to run. Already their infrastructure is so damaged. So inshallah, for Ramadan, the hope is that this truce will hold. But unfortunately, previous ceasefires have broken down, and so I'm not unfortunately not terribly optimistic that this one will last.
Yeah, let me ask you. I mean, normally what I'm finding, and especially as I get older and the more foreign affairs nonsense that I'm privy to and what I know, and it's like this is like everything else, right? Where we are completely on the wrong side, correct?
Yes, the
Okay.
U.S. has been.
Okay, I don't
Yeah.
know all the details. Like I kind of understand the factions, but we're wrong, right? I mean, we're wrong.
So the U.S. has been supporting the Saudi-led coalition from the beginning. That was the Obama administration's decision, and the context for that was the Iran nuclear deal, that they hoped that by supporting what the Saudis were doing to Yemen, which the Saudis said would, it'd be super easy, it'd be over in just a couple of weeks, we're just going to go kick out those rebels, that then the Saudis would sort of pull their punches on criticizing the Iran nuclear deal, which did not happen. And obviously now we're into the 8th year of this conflict, so that calculus was also flawed. Trump escalated the support and sort of removed some of the Obama administration had imposed a few measures to try to limit civilian casualties. So this graph in particular, so the Biden administration, when they first came in, Biden said, we're going to end this war, we're going to end our support for the war. And instead, what we've seen is them continuing to support the Saudis. They sold the Saudis over $1 billion in new weapons just over the past year. They had paused two sales, but then allowed those sales to go through.
Here, I think I have that here. I think I have it next to the UAE one. But yeah, this is what you're talking about right here, like our sales.
Yes, so people can see the U.S. weapons sales to Saudi Arabia were massive under the Obama administration. In particular, in 2015, after this time when Obama had negotiated the Iran nuclear deal and had said to the region, to the Saudis, look, you guys need to figure out a modus vivendi with Iran, and we're washing our hands because we've solved the nuclear question. And yet they were flooding the region with these weapons. And then again, we saw that during Trump. And at this point, some weapons experts have said there's just not a whole lot left to even sell the Saudis. Whereas to the UAE, we did see a huge spike in sales after the Abraham Accords, and in particular, the agreement to sell them the F-35s that's kind of on the rails right now because of concerns about maybe China gaining access to US military intelligence because of their partnership with the UAE. But there are a lot of other sales going through. So in terms of that first graph, I think that may be the most important one in the report because it really pushes back against the Biden administration's narrative, which is that the Houthis are sort of a co-equal aggressor here, and that we, the United States, must continue to support our security partners, the Saudis. But when you look at, so the blue line are the Saudi coalition airstrikes. So most of these are conducted by the Saudis, always with US assistance. The Saudi Air Force cannot fly without maintenance and spare parts provided by US military contractors. So that's, you can see, big spikes, and this had to do with just the terms of the war. There were some previous ceasefires announced. That's when you see them go way down. And then the little red line at the bottom, those are Houthi attacks on Saudi Arabia. And so when the Biden administration posits the Houthis as the aggressors and, condemns their attacks on infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, they're certainly, it's fine to condemn them, but we also need to be talking about what the Saudis are doing to Yemen and just comparing the scale here. And the other thing to keep in mind is that 90% of Houthi transporter attacks are blocked with the assistance of the US with things like Patriot anti-missile systems. And so even that tiny little red line, 90% of that doesn't make it across the border, or does it, it is blown up in the air by something like a Patriot anti-missile system. So just in general, and the other thing we do observe here is that the attacks actually did go way down during the Trump administration. And part of that had to do with action from Congress. We saw Congress successfully pass a war powers resolution in spring of 2019. Trump then vetoed it, unfortunately. But this was the first time that Congress had asserted its congressional war powers since the War Powers Act was passed in the wake of Vietnam in 1973. So the Biden administration came in, and we should have seen attacks go way down because Biden said he was going to end all support for offensive actions. And yet what we see are kind of similar numbers to the Trump era, and then it just goes way up, as we can see in kind of the most recent months. So again, clearly the Biden administration is continuing to provide support here to the Saudis, which completely goes against what he said his policy was going to be. They've maintained that we're only providing support for defensive operations, which itself is sort of questionable. I mean, we shouldn't.
That is a distinction without a difference. Okay, like that is the most ridiculous thing. I thought it at the time. This discrepancy here to me is very similar. Like that's how I think about like in Israel. That's kind of like the disparity that we're seeing here, and yet that's what's put out as, oh, it's the Houthis, they're the problem. They're clearly not the problem.
We're speaking with Annelle Sheline. Yeah,
Sheline.
I said it. Dr. Annelle Sheline.
No, go, please say what you were going to say about that.
I have to do an update every once in a while. We are running a show here. We're speaking with Dr. Annelle Sheline, a fellow at the Quincy Institute. One of the things that I think is very important that we talk about here, on the one hand, of course, is why has there been such a massive financial weaponry buildup in the United Arab Emirates? Why has that shifted essentially from?
And we never talk about that. No one ever talks about the UAE.
No, they don't, and that's one of the most. That is one of the most despicable havens on the planet.
All right.
So please share.
Yeah. Why don't we talk about that?
The Emiratis are very good at image management. The Saudis are not terribly good. They often sort of, MBS was trying. If people may remember his sort of charm tour in 2017 and early 2018, he came to the US, he came to Europe, and everyone said, oh, he was this great new reformer who's going to transform Saudi Arabia. But then after the Khashoggi
I was going to
It's
say,
never
then
been.
he chopped up a journalist and shoved him in a briefcase, and so that went out the window.
Right, and he's been struggling ever since to try to reassert this sort of image management. But the UAE is very good at it, and some of that is backed up by certain policy changes that. I mean, again, in terms of human rights abuses, that has not changed. They have not, in terms of what their own citizenry experience, it is still an extremely repressive state, similar to what Saudi citizens experience. But in general, the UAE has been very successful at sort of cultivating this image of a tolerant, open, magnet for investment and tourism and innovation. And so this is part of why when we saw the Houthi drone attacks on Abu Dhabi in January, which was the Houthis responding to the fact that the UAE had gotten back involved in Yemen. Essentially, at the end of 2019, the UAE had decided this is just too bad for our PR. Like we're going to withdraw militarily, although they did maintain control of certain strategic islands like Socotra and Mayoun. Mayoun Island is right at the very entrance, the southern entrance to the Red Sea, so a very strategically important island. But they weren't going to be on the front lines in the same way that they had been. But then what we saw in January was UAE-backed proxy forces upping their offensives in Yemen, and the Houthis responded, and they successfully sent a drone that unfortunately did kill 3 people in Abu Dhabi. And since then, the UAE has been strenuously pushing for the Houthis to be redesignated as a foreign terrorist organization. This is interesting because Trump had threatened to do this, but he only ultimately did it in the very, very final hours of his administration, in part because I think he knew it would be a PR disaster, because it would be the effects of that would be sort of so catastrophic in terms of that there would be no aid that could get into Yemen at all. It would just be, going from the frying pan into the fire. But he did it, I think, essentially just to throw something else at Biden that Biden would then have to deal with. And Biden very wisely lifted that designation because the effects on the provision of aid in Yemen would have been so great. But we've now seen a lot of pressure from the Saudis and the UAE to reinstate that designation, even though nothing has changed. Again, the Houthis would not be particularly affected by it. They aren't really plugged into international financial networks the way they would need to be for it to actually affect them. And the only effect would be to further immiserate Yemenis.
I just wanted to ask you something that I learned from this is that one of the reasons we're aligned with the Saudis or we're being so supportive of their genocide is this sort of like false notion that it'll keep them from interacting with China and Russia, and that somehow we'll sort of maintain this monopoly if they get all their love and attention. And that's not happening, and yet we're still doing this. So could you talk about that aspect? Because I thought that's really interesting. So not only are we doing this, but it's not even working.
Totally. And I think Americans are sort of used to this idea that we have to hold our noses and deal with the Saudis because we're dependent on their oil, and we aren't anymore. The US only imports 7% of oil from Saudi Arabia. And certainly the Saudis can have an impact on the price, but that sort of narrative that we have to go along with what the Saudis want for oil is just literally no longer true. And instead, it is this dynamic that unfortunately sort of comes along with this broader shift in Washington towards this sort of framework of great power competition, and this notion that the US has to be competing with China. Obviously now a lot more focus on Russia as a near peer competitor. And this notion that one of the only areas where the US can compete with China is in weapons sales. We can't compete with them economically, but we still have an edge as kind of the world's largest exporter of weapons, and we still have a reputation as sort of producing the latest, greatest, fanciest weapons. And so the concern is if we, the United States, impose additional restrictions on what we sell to Saudi Arabia, if we make it harder for them to buy our weapons, that we're going to lose our market share essentially, and that they will turn to China or perhaps Russia, and essentially what. So the question then is kind of like, so what? I mean, so the effect is that like Raytheon share prices go down. I mean, what exactly are we losing there, other than the fact that we wouldn't then be potentially drawn in backwards to fight a war on Saudi Arabia and the UAE's behalf, which is the concern we're running into now. Again, with that drone attack on Abu Dhabi, there were reports that it could have threatened U.S. forces at the Al Dhafra Air Force Base, and the concern there being, if a U.S. service member were killed, would Biden have declared war and gotten us into another war in the Middle East, which we know he doesn't want to do and Americans are fed up with. But if we've committed ourselves to defending Saudi Arabia and the UAE, it could very easily happen.
What would you say regarding corporate media and the impact that they still have, especially regarding foreign policy? When Russia invaded Ukraine, I mean, the only thing I can really think of is just how excited channels like CNN were about the fact that their golden goose was no longer in the White House and they couldn't just talk. I mean, they still talk about Trump 24/7. They still talk about me like I'm still there. Believe me, it's really amazing. But what is even more amazing is the fact that the bloodlust that exists in the war machine in the Beltway, combine that with people looking at what's going on in Ukraine, which is terrible, but in many ways, it pales in comparison as to what's been going on in Yemen for so long. And I'm almost thinking, what if the media actually covered Yemen the way that they were covering Ukraine? I can't even imagine what the reaction would be from this country, thinking about just what a brutal genocide is taking place there. And it's been taking place there for 7 years.
Oh, I think, and that's where I really want to talk about is like, I don't think people understand what this looks like. I remember a couple years ago watching a report from Eva Bartlett from her that she was there and did actual reporting. I know that's crazy for, we don't really get that here, and I know that the same Doctors Without Borders hospital has been bombed at least 2 times. And to me, that's intentional. Okay, that's intentional. So now, so now we're complicit, if not causing war crimes against our own people, because a lot of the people that work in Doctors Without Borders hospitals are not people that are Saudi or Yemeni, or they're people from all over the world and very potentially here. I'm just saying. So like, these are intentional things that are taking place. This isn't like just collateral damage, is my point. This is really intentional. Can you talk about like what that looks like there? Because to me, it's people are living in rubble and running down from drones every day.
Absolutely. I mean, Yemen has been so destroyed. And as I talk about in the report, for example, there's kind of this notion that with US assistance, the Saudis are better able to target. But when you actually look at this, these numbers are from the Yemen Data Project, which has done a fantastic job documenting the Saudi-led airstrikes and other aspects of the conflict. But the point is that when you can determine the target, sometimes they can't determine what a target, what was the intended target. But in where you can determine, it's about half and half for civilian targets and non-civilian, aka military targets. So, this notion that with US assistance, the Saudis are somehow conducting a more humane war is complete nonsense, in part because so much of what the Saudis are doing is this blockade where they're not allowing food and fuel, in particular fuel, to get in. They do allow some food, it's limited, but the Saudis don't want the Houthis to be able to profit at all from sort of taxing the fuel as it comes in, or essentially they're justifying this. And again, the UN is still supporting the Saudis' position here, because the UN Security Council resolution that continues to govern the international approach to Yemen remains the one that was agreed upon back in 2015. It's Security Council Resolution 2216. And that is one of the many things that would need to change in order to try to sort of get some sort of shift here on Yemen. Again, it's very exciting that the UN was involved in brokering this 2-month truce, but as I said, I'm just worried that it's not actually going to last. And to your earlier point about the media, it would make a huge difference if the media were actually covering Yemen. I do think that part of why we're seeing such a focus on Ukraine and such an absence of focus on Yemen is partly just to do with the fact that Americans have really had to, we've had our noses rubbed in sort of our imperialist and really unjust policies in terms of kind of the aftermath of the war in Afghanistan and obviously the war in Iraq and just sort of the whole war on terror framework. I think Americans are just really exhausted by and don't like the feelings it produces, which is maybe we got this wrong. Like it seems like the policies we've been chasing for the past 20 years have not actually made us safer and have caused so much damage and so much death around the world. Whereas Ukraine, we get to feel good about supporting the underdog Ukrainians and pushing back against the evil Russia, evil Putin. And to feel once again that there's this sort of sense of righteousness and that we're on the right side here. Whereas again in Yemen, I think it's just a reminder of sort of this legacy of the awful choices we made and continue to make in the war on terror. But one key thing to remind people of here is they can make a difference because of this war powers resolution that Representative Jayapal and DeFazio committed to reintroduce. Ro Khanna has come out in support, as has Bernie Sanders. They will reintroduce this Yemen war powers resolution. And so every call that someone makes to their member of Congress, to their senator, would make a huge difference. I work with folks on the Hill and they really do listen to calls, not as much petitions. Those don't necessarily quite do as much, but they really do register constituent phone calls. So I think if I would have one message, it would be, if you care about this, call your member of Congress and call your senator's office and tell them to support the Yemen war powers resolution.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. I mean, the truth is we shouldn't have to be doing that because this shouldn't be in the condition that it's in the first place. The whole fact that our Congress has totally forfeited its war powers is ludicrous to me. And we've done it consistently for so many administrations at this point that our Constitution has been turned inside out and backwards when it comes to war powers. And to me, it's incredibly infuriating because people are very willing to buy whatever nationalistic nonsense is stuck in front of their faces that makes them feel good as a nation. And yet, nobody's addressing that the damage that we're doing isn't happening to the bad people. It's happening to regular people, families, people that, all I can think about, I saw this video. I don't know if you've seen, I don't remember what I saw it on, but it was this family living in what used to be their house in Yemen under tons of rubble. And they would come out and then they would have to go back in when the drones were over, and there are these little kids and this is where they were playing, was in the rubble. And I'm thinking their mother, it's like all I think about are these are just mothers that are trying to get their kids from point A to point B in one piece. And that's the people that are suffering. And it's so bad in Yemen. I mean, and for people who, on our side of the universe, that's like Haiti, but on the other side. It's the poorest of the poorest people. You could not kick people that are already more down than people in Yemen. And that is what is so frustrating about this not getting coverage. There's nobody worse off than the people in Yemen. Truthfully, I think that's got to be the worst country economically conditioned in that part of the world.
This is also
right. I mean, it is. It's bad.
Definitely in the Middle East is absolutely the very poorest. I mean, unfortunately, I think there are other parts of the world, parts of Africa that also deal with kind of similar levels of poverty, but in terms of kind of the scope of the humanitarian crisis, Yemen's is the worst.
And then compared to Saudi Arabia and UAE and the people that are, it's ridiculous, David and Goliath, to the point where it almost seems bizarro that this is happening. Like,
And
it's the
this
most
is-
ludicrous thing ever. I mean, that graph proved it. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
And this is also one of the most frustrating parts of our congressional representative. Jen ran for Congress in 2020 against W. Wasserman Schultz, and she is a notorious hawk.
Never met a war she didn't support.
And I think about where she lives in a nice, privileged, upper middle class gated community. And the reason she's there is because she presses the yes button on bombing the hell out of these poor countries and destroying these people's lives. Because the military industrial complex gives her a lot of money. A lot of money. Particularly Raytheon,
And
Boeing, and
Northrop.
Northrop Grumman, as they do. But General Dynamics gives her a lot of money. And so the reason they do is because they know that when it comes time to say, do you want to do regime change in Venezuela? Do you want to bomb the hell out of Yemen?
What has she said about this War Powers Act? What has she said about that? I can't imagine her saying anything.
Not going to say anything. And considering the fact
she won't get behind
that Upside Wales, or what is the organization called? The organization that tracks the stock stages of
oh my God, I forget. Whales, something Unusual Whales?
Unusual Whales. So this website, Unusual Whales, tracks the stock purchases of the congressional representatives. And the single biggest stock purchase and profit as a result of the invasion in Ukraine was Wasserman Schultz investing in a energy drilling company. So when something like that happens,
total insider trading. She made over 60% over like a 3-month thing right before Russia invaded Ukraine.
Look, the bottom line is if you invest in a stock and you make more than 12% on the stock,
64%.
They consider that to be like, okay, what's going on here? You're making 64% return on investment. I mean, I don't know how much more they have to wipe their rear end with the Constitution, but they make a really bad habit out of it.
Fracking and drilling. You go, girl.
And so if that's not enough, we are now sitting in a situation. We put a post on social media the other day. It's been 3 months since the United States Senate issued that they were putting forward a bill to ban the stock trading. I don't know about you, but I would like to think that if these representatives on Capitol Hill were not able to profit from war, we probably wouldn't be involved in as many of them. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at the numbers in terms of, which members of Congress get how much money from the big 5 weapons producers and other companies that profit from the military industrial complex or that make it up. And it's just so clear. You see it lines up exactly with their voting. And unfortunately, I think people don't think they can do anything about it, or they're not aware. I've honestly don't quite know why people are willing to
the corruption
continue.
They don't even hide it anymore. And the people, we're like battered spouses. We just don't think we deserve any better.
This is why
it's ridiculous. They just flaunt it.
This is why the whole thing about everybody was so up in arms about Trump's corruption. And my attitude is, he's doing what everybody does. He's just so brazen about it. He doesn't care if anybody knows.
Well, neither does Nancy Pelosi, apparently.
They think, listen, you could say a lot about Trump, but the level of corruption with somebody like Pelosi and the amount of money that she has made since being in Congress, you only make that if you're a crook.
Right.
Harry Truman said that. You can only get rich in public service if you're a crook.
It's
like, that's it. That's the only way. So this is a systemic problem that has completely engulfed our country. But the problem is that when it comes to foreign policy, it gets really bad. If you want to know my biggest beef with our former president, it's the fact that he vetoed the resolution to end the genocide in Yemen. That, to me, is the blackest mark on Trump's presidency, and no one talks about it. It's like a forgotten thing, like it didn't even happen. And anything that benefits the military-industrial complex will always go by the wayside. And so I think, Annelle, the best place to wind down this conversation is to really address what our role is right now with what is going on in Ukraine. Because there is this understanding of sorts that we are, or at least on paper, it looks like Ukraine and Russia are trying to come to the negotiating table.
You do realize that she's a Middle East expert.
Yeah, she is a Middle East expert, but this is an issue where I would assume you're at least somewhat familiar with the fact that we've stuck our nose in this business, especially with the constant weapons deliverance that we are giving to the Ukrainians. And I'm not to say that they shouldn't be able to defend themselves, but I am under the impression that we are exacerbating the problem. Is that fair?
Yes, I mean, I think the concern in particular are things like imposing the sanctions on Russia, but not necessarily making it clear that they would be lifted if Russia changed its behavior, which is the only way that sanctions are, we know in general sanctions are not particularly effective as a policy tool, but when they are effective, it's because there's a clear path to, if you change this behavior, the sanctions will lift. And that's not what these sanctions are. And, the other, things like when Biden made the regime change comment, knowing that that's actually what a lot of people in Washington want, as opposed to, we just have to end what Russia's doing to Ukraine. And if Ukraine is willing to accept the terms in order to end the violence, we need to be 100% on board with that and support them to every extent that we can, to help to, if they did achieve a ceasefire, to help maintain that. Because the most important thing is to try to help the people of Ukraine. And, similar in Yemen, the most, there are considerations about, okay, like, we're worried about Iranian support for the Houthis. And all of that is kind of, I'm personally not as concerned about that. I think the reason Iran is involved is partly just because it's a great way to sort of poke Saudi Arabia. And if the Saudis were no longer involved, Iran wouldn't be it wouldn't be as interested.
Right.
But again, the most important thing to do is to try to end the suffering and to get the violence to stop. And then we can, then return control of the conflict to the people themselves, whether it's the people of Ukraine who decide they're willing to accept these terms in order to stop the killing, or the people of Yemen that, among themselves, once the Saudis hopefully withdraw, they will have to figure out, like, what is the political structure in Yemen going to look like. And the war may not end immediately, but we will have returned sovereignty of the conflict to them, and stop trying to sort of impose our own will on it, and to continue to profit as a result of our military interventionism.
You're suggesting that we don't imperialize the planet and impose our will on every sovereign nation just because it benefits us financially? That's a crazy concept.
And when an additional $35 billion has been added to the military budget, it's not hard to see why.
Democrats can't give them enough money. They just cannot seem to they give them more money than they even ask for. See, they can't even pretend. There's not even Mick resistance anymore.
The worst president of my lifetime, without question, is George W. Bush. But what a lot of people don't seem to realize is that as much as people don't want to admit this, most wars are started by Democrats, not Republicans. So if you look back in history, that's just the way it is.
It is.
So with that said, I don't think either party, it makes a difference. Ultimately, it's about whose pockets are being lined with which corporate special interest money. And when it comes to the military-industrial complex, there simply is no limit to what they will spend to keep this going. And unfortunately, we are stuck with the few brave souls on Capitol Hill that are not bought by the military-industrial complex trying to end this. If they are able to get a similar bill to Biden's desk as they did with Trump, will he ultimately sign it into law, or will he veto it? I don't know. What I do know is that we've been running roughshod over the entire globe for way too long. And it's good to see that the majority, if not the overwhelming majority of this country, is sick of war. That's a really good thing. And the fact that even hints of, well, maybe we should have a no-fly zone. Well, maybe we should. And most Americans are like, no, we definitely don't.
But there are people that are supporting that. It's unbelievable.
Oh, of course there is. But
are you insane?
This is. But Annelle, would you say it's fair that this is not like the spring of 2003? I mean, I can remember being in college in a lecture hall, and I'm not even 20 yet, and I'm seeing people saying, well, we got to bring the Iraqis freedom. I'm thinking, are you people out of your freaking
But people
minds?
bought that story.
Like, you really buy this stuff? You can't see that. You can't see how you can't see you're being taken for a ride. But apparently nowadays, more and more people are starting to get it. And if there's any silver lining, I would say that that's it.
Yeah.
This this gets to, part of what we're trying to do at the Quincy Institute. And, we do reach out to folks on the right. We do get some Koch money. We also were founded with money from George Soros and have a whole bunch of other funders, although no foreign funding and no Raytheon dollars, obviously, like none of that sort of corporate funding. But trying to tap into this fact that people on both the right and the left are just exhausted by the endless wars. And I do agree with you. I think, people partly because of social media and the internet. Sorry. Dog.
No, we're done. We actually just got rid of mine because I don't want her to be interrupting us. But so yeah, no, we're fine.
Hopefully my husband will corral him. But I do think it's different than at the beginning of 2003 when I remember going to protest that war. I was in high school and just feeling so like we were just so tiny. I mean, it was a big protest, and it was actually like historically a massive day of protest against the Iraq War. But the forces arrayed against it, or arrayed in favor of the war, were just so powerful and hegemonic. And I do think that does seem different this time. I do worry, however, that kind of the momentum of the war machine will eventually sort of overcome this initial hesitancy that Americans seem to have a bit of a sense of like, no, we don't want to start World War III here. And we don't want to get dragged back into another futile and unnecessary war. But it's such a constant, it's ongoing. It's not over. And so, I'm so grateful to what you and your team are doing to try to push back against this. And, the fact that there are a lot more voices out there, I think, trying to push back.
Well, we try.
Yeah. We try. We're very, very highly suppressed. And basically so we're struggling to get out of being, try to get messages out there. But that's what we want to do. I mean, that's what, but this is the team. We're the team.
And essentially,
the whole team.
The whole point of our podcast is to really, unify as many voices from as many different political spectrums as possible. We had Colonel Rob Maness from Louisiana, who ran for the U.S. Senate and the GOP on our channel. And I got to tell you, we agreed far more than we didn't agree. And we're non-corporate progressive. So there really is not that significant a difference when you get right down to it with the majority of issues that face us on a day-to-day basis. Corporate power is extremely effective at dividing and conquering.
That's the whole point.
And a person is resourceful. People are dangerous. Because the groupthink, groupthink is very dangerous. Look, have you seen a Trump rally? So there is this notion
we went to the Trump rally.
There is this notion that the more people that are together in a setting, the more susceptible they are to that groupthink mentality. And so we really are doing our due diligence to try to break that. And what you're doing is obviously great. Annelle, where can people follow your work? Is there anything you're working on?
Quincy Institute. Wait, let me put this up because I had the thing up. You guys, you should really need to check out this piece. But then I ended up down a whole rabbit hole at the Quincy Institute because there's a lot of really good reports there.
It's all the way to the top.
All right, here you can. It's right there. Yeah, talk about the Quincy Institute a little bit, like what kind of stuff that you're working on, what its purpose is, and because guys, I never knew of this and just found a whole bunch of a plethora of very good information.
So we were founded late 2019. I came on kind of early 2020, right before COVID hit. And the whole idea is to be transpartisan. Like I said, that some of that initial money did come from the Kochs on the right and Soros on the left, and a bunch of, often it's small donations from people who just believe in trying to push back against militarism. So that is the whole point. We have an East Asia team, which is trying to push back against this narrative of kind of the impending Cold War with China, and to reframe that to say, no, actually, the most important crisis humanity faces is climate change. And if we direct all of our resources into the military-industrial complex, in particular, a new Cold War with China, that's it. I mean, that's the future of the planet right there. I mean, at least the planet as we know it. We, our fellow Anatol Lieven has been sort of carrying our Russia program, where we recently hired someone to help him with that, given all the work he's been doing in the context of trying to have a better informed discussion about what's happening in Ukraine, and again to recenter the Ukrainian people and not some of these sort of regime change fantasies of a lot of people in the Beltway. My boss, Trita Parsi, who's one of the co-founders, is an expert on Iran, was very involved in sort of negotiations around the Iran nuclear deal, and is working to try to reinstate that as the only thing that ever successfully constrained Iran's nuclear program, and that if we were to reinstate it, we could get back to that. But instead, we're sort of caught in this endless cycle of the politics around it. And in the meantime, we may have to deal with now newly nuclear powers in the Middle East, knowing that this would kick off an arms race. And as far as Saudi Arabia and the UAE, other countries would also demand access to nuclear weapons, in addition to Israel, which already has them. So we're still a new think tank. Unfortunately, we don't yet have an expert looking at Latin America or looking at Africa. We're hoping to expand there, but we sort of started out with the places where the U.S. military has the largest presence, and where we have this risk of kind of this over militarization or the risk of becoming more involved in a war. That's kind of the initial set of considerations. Also, my colleague Adam Weinstein, a veteran of the war in Afghanistan, was a very vocal proponent of the Biden administration's decision to withdraw from Afghanistan, and also now a strident critic of what the Biden administration is doing as far as not allowing aid to get to the people of Afghanistan.
He's protected by the corporate media.
He's going to end up having to be responsible for killing more Afghani people and women and children, and that's just the thing. I mean, that is just so ridiculous that that's not getting covered more also, because the sanctions are a war crime, people. Sorry, but they are.
They are.
So, just
100%.
saying. I really appreciate what you guys are doing. People, check out Quincy Institute for sure. Please continue.
I was just going to say that's us. We are looking, we're building and hiring out. But in the meantime, find us on Twitter, find our work on our website. Really appreciate what your team, the both of you, are doing and trying to draw attention to so much. So many of these issues are all bound up together. It's like foreign policy is domestic policy and domestic policy is foreign policy. And
yeah,
we just had a big event at the Riverside Church in New York with Dr. Martin Luther King's daughter, who it was the anniversary of his speech of the three triplets of like the three major ills in American society being militarism, extreme materialism, and racism.
Yeah.
And the point that we continue to be plagued by those ills. And reiterating the extent to which our wars abroad are then brought home upon our own citizens. Obviously, the Black community knows this better than anyone, but I think especially during the protests of 2020, I think other non-Black people started to have a bit of a better sense of what it means for such a militarized police force to turn those weapons on Americans.
Yeah, it's the over militarization, and this is a world thing right now. It isn't just here. There's this right wing sort of like little fascist thing going on all over the place with authoritarian nonsense. And so it's a matter of the regular people sort of uniting.
But again, the reason it's happening is because people are desperate. People need direction. And right now they have nothing.
They need food.
So when that happens, what do you expect? Military strongmen, if you will. And that is essentially what we're faced with right now. And the more we have these conversations, the more that we build these bridges that need to be built and are only looking at the ironclad solutions and the things that will unite us more effectively, then that's how we're going to get to where we need to go. Annelle,
are you in Texas? Are you in Texas? Are you in the Houston area?
I did a postdoc there, but I'm back in DC now, so I'm sitting in Washington right now.
Okay, so you're not okay. So I saw something about you being at Rice, and I was in Texas for 6 years. My son was born there, but you're not a Texan.
I got to live in Houston for a year and a half during my postdoc, But no, I grew up in North Carolina.
Ooh, even better. I'm there every summer, Asheville, every summer in the mountains.
Thanks.
Where are you? What part are you from?
Durham.
Oh, okay. You know what? I need to go.
Sorry,
there. I heard
sorry.
It's so beautiful.
Sorry about Saturday night, my friend.
Oh, for God. Not everybody is into sports games. She doesn't even know what you're talking about.
She knows about Coach K losing his last game. So
Oh, is this a final?
I mean, I got so fed up with basketball as a child that I refused to engage with any of it. Completely agnostic on the basketball question.
Yeah,
that's true. Well, you know what? Duke and UNC both have phenomenal education programs.
That's
so
true,
it's
but
not,
there's quite the rivalry.
yes.
There's quite the rivalry there.
So I'm sure you heard much about it on Saturday, but Dr. Annelle Sheline, we can't thank you enough. We really
Thank you
appreciate
so
you coming
much.
on.
I really
Very
appreciate it.
informative.
Oh, yeah, no, and we are building an archive. Like mostly what we do is interview experts, authors, people, and talk like about major issues. And that is the purpose of this. I mean, we make it fun and live, but really it's building like a library of information because people need information that they're just not getting.
That's true. We have people on the live stream tonight who specifically said, I didn't even know about
right.
this.
Thank you. And thank you very much for contributing to that. I appreciate it.
Really
Would you come back again sometime?
Of course. Happy
Thank
to
you
come
so
back.
much. It was so nice to meet you.
Have a great
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
She was lovely.
Very nice lady. And
Oh my
of course,
God.
very informative.
Oh my God.
I'm sure most would agree.
I have to tell you that like of our like guests in terms of like knowledge level to age proportion, she's got to be by the way like the youngest expert I think that we've had on about some serious stuff that just really know. I mean, usually we have people on like Tom Hartman, Harvey K, like these guys, and they know their stuff, but they tend to be a little older. And she is quite young. She's younger than you.
Scat, I'm only going to warn you once. You pull this and you do this in any way, you're going into timeout.
Why are you being mean? Don't be mean. It's unnecessary. We all know the truth, and there's no point in that. And I wanted to, and he brought up about how I wasn't on the Michael Knoll show. I will own that I was all set up to do the Michael Knoll show. I was sitting here in the studio, and I had Skype up and I got the camera working, but they couldn't hear me. And it was in a daytime situation. So I was here alone. My husband wasn't home and I am not techie and I couldn't figure it out and they had to go live. So they will reschedule. It is not something that we made up.
About that.
Well, maybe they won't. And then that's fine too. And you know what, whatever. I mean, shit happens. And I'm not, a tech person. We don't have a staff. I don't have
we may have somebody now who's going to help us. So.
And yes, and that wouldn't have necessarily affected that at the time. We don't have a person in the studio because we don't have a staff. We are the team. And so it is what it is. I'm not going to, I'm only going to feel so bad about it, but nobody lied about me going on this show. I was sitting here, I watched him going live on the Skype and I couldn't get my volume.
Oh, well.
And then I had to be yelled at by him about it, which I didn't appreciate.
See, that's a nice message. Thank you, Foxy.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. I believe that too. And I think that's the most important thing. Is our goal is to get information to people. And yeah, we know some things, but we don't know enough. So we have to have experts on so that we can learn things and you can learn things. That's the point. I don't need to know everything. I don't need to. And it's a lot easier for me to have Dr. Sheline come on than me sit there and research and figure it all out. Like I can't be an expert on everything. I can't.
We still don't know what our show is going to look like on Wednesday.
We don't. We do know what we have a guest though. We have a candidate.
Yes, Spencer
Why is my thing not
Toder,
working? So
I think
Spencer Toder.
We'll have John come on and make a comment about that.
Oh my God, I'd rather not. Why are you encouraging that behavior? There it is.
Sorry about that. Well, that means a lot, Geek Publican. We have no problem. If the Republicans come to our show and this is where they get their info, great, because we're not here to tell you that Republicans bad, Democrats good.
Not at all. Actually, I would actually almost pride myself if I'm the sort of like left source of information for right-wing people. That's a pretty good thing, actually.
Yeah, I like that.
I think that's a really good thing. I have no problem with that. There's right sources that I respect more than others. Not all people are the same on the sides.
And most of the, I would say, yeah, and that's a great point. we remain the main source of progressive mindset. And what I would say is,
Thank you.
when it comes to economic populism, there really isn't that big of a difference.
No.
Because ultimately, the reason we advocate for universal health care is because we don't need for-profit middlemen in between us and our doctors. And I would like to think everybody agrees with that. And anybody who is a libertarian, for example, who doesn't believe in wasting money, would look at it and say, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, all you have to do is look at the numbers. It's already been proven.
Doesn't
Like,
make
that's why I won't debate it anymore, because the numbers are the numbers.
And if you
we
want-
save money with a no-profit system.
Just like we save money if we go to a clean energy grid. And there are two sources of energy that are on this planet that are actually carbon neutral, and we have to use them to transition properly away from coal and oil and natural gas. And of course, that is propane and nuclear. And so those are just two examples of things that we can do while we build up and should be building up. President Biden, Defense Production Act, could be enacting a clean energy grid right now, building up endless solar fields and wind farms and biofuel tanks.
Speaking of this does remind me of where we went yesterday, and one of the sponsors of we went yesterday, Peter and I, to the Dania Beach Seafood and Art Festival, which was really fun, actually. I had a really good beverage, big beverage, lots of cute dogs, really good food. The music was good, like a lot of good things. But Peter, please share, who is one of the sponsors? And there was an entire like sand sculpture thing.
FP&L.
It was FP&L.
You know,
That is why we can't have nice things, because the corporate people have bought our municipalities. So now, are the people in Dania Beach, like on their commission, are they beholden more to FP&L because FP&L gives them money and sponsors things? Or are they going to be doing what's in the best interest of people and a clean energy grid? Like, I don't know. The appearance of impropriety is not good.
FP&L, Kimco Realty, don't know who they are.
Well, I mean,
Dania Point, obviously.
which is, by the way, Dania Point is basically a big developer that's trying to gentrify Dania Beach.
Oh, they already have.
Yeah,
Budweiser.
that doesn't bother me.
Uh,
I mean,
wait.
people are going to drink.
Waste Management. Atlantic Pacific.
All I know is FP&L is not our friend.
Wyndham Garden.
That doesn't bother me.
True by Hilton. Jose Hilton. So a couple of
Jose Hilton and
Celeste City
Walmart.
Line, and of course Walmart. So there you go. Look, the event, if people want to be there and they want to hang out and have a good time. And you know, the truth is, the thing that we also found very interesting about this event is that most of the people were Republicans. There's no question. You can kind of,
Those are so mean.
you know, they were definitely people that you could tell were on that side. And look, a lot of them were wearing, you know, the American flag with the black and silver American flag with the blue stripe, you know, defend the blue. But the one person that I would tell you that I did meet was this gentleman who is a hardcore Republican. He's a former, he's a Marine.
Thank you.
And, you know, he had these, he carves these American flags on wood, which are very nice. And, you know, one of them said, "Let's go, Brandon."
Let's go, Brandon.
But the one that he made that I thought was really nice was the one that just has the inscription of 1776. And so we ended up talking for a few minutes, and I gave him our card and, you know, told him about our podcast, told him that Jen ran against Debbie. He got really excited.
Oh, there's one thing they all can agree on. It's that.
But the truth is, he appreciated me complimenting his business and just saying that, you know, it's nice to know that somebody who may not vote the same way that he does doesn't see him as an enemy. And, you know, there's a lot of people out there that probably are wishing that it was like that. So don't look at people who vote differently than you as somebody who's your enemy, because most of them are not. There's always going to be,
Thank you, Fly Foxy.
you know, the ones who kind of see it as, oh, well, you voted for the other side, so that must mean that you're a bad person, or you're a commie, or you're a fascist. It's God, you don't even know what those terms mean.
Most people have no idea what they mean. Why is he being so mean today?
I don't know.
Scat, why are you being so mean?
Who cares?
I'm just, you know, I should consider wearing makeup. I am wearing makeup. I
So-
guess that's sad for me.
So with that
To
said,
cover all my wrinkles.
we do not have a plan other than a candidate right now, but we will potentially have. We're trying to get Chris Smalls on for Wednesday, along with George.
Well, that would be great.
Like to
You
get
know,
both of them, actually.
That would be really
Jordan
great.
says he's available.
That'd be awesome.
I would really, well, you know what?
The truth is, we could have Jordan because nobody's covered it like Jordan.
Yeah,
like
of course. And of course, well, Jordan will come on. But the thing is, I would like to have, if not Chris, then at least a couple of the other lead organizers of the Amazon workers in Staten Island. So
I'd also, at some point, I wish there was a way for us to know who the people are down here that might be organizing that at that Amazon location. Because
there's a few of them down there.
yeah, I'd love
One
to
in
touch
particular
base
that
with
would
Chris
be-
about that. I'd love to know who the local people are that might be interested or be starting to do that down here. Because we can actually show up for them. You know what I mean? We can show up for them.
That is an excellent point. That is an excellent point. That's what council members will say. They're a great partner of the community.
The
You know
Geek
what that
Publican,
means?
you must be here because of Sean Hartman, my
No,
friend.
what that means is that waste management gives money. And if waste management gives money, then that's it. That's really what matters. It's like, oh, well, that doesn't affect my decision making. You know, that's how they justify it.
Actually, Scat, that does make me feel better. Thank you.
Oh.
Because now I know that he's the truth is, if this was someone who hated us so much, they sure spend a lot of time supporting our channel and watching. So it's obviously, that's
You know
why
what,
I think it's a friendly troll, but
and
you
you
don't
know-
have to make fun of the wrinkles. I am getting a little old.
And you know what I say to that? What he said?
Hmm.
I don't care. Who cares?
No, because now I know it's
Doesn't
just
affect you.
silliness. It's not just being me, but the truth is that at my age, you know, I should, if you were to line up a whole bunch of people from my graduating class, I guarantee you I look younger than a lot of them.
Matt,
I did
that's-
way too much sun damage.
Matt, that's what we're trying to do. Trying to get people that actually were involved. Oh, it is Sean Hartman.
Oh, it is Sean Hartman.
So there you go. But guys, we appreciate you. Hit the like button, share, do whatever you got to do to get it out there. We're working on some stuff behind the scenes now. We've actually got somebody that's going to be working with us to help us mitigate the very puny numbers, as Scat likes to point out. So we're going
But
to.
yet I appreciate Scat because Scat's one of our members.
Hey, that counts, right?
Well, that's the point. So it's
So
like
if
if
you
we
wanna
were
dance
so
on our grave a
bad,
little
they
bit,
wouldn't
that'd be
be
so
here so often.
That's
Yeah, no, which is why I don't. That's why it's not really
6
that.
and 1/2 dozen.
Kind of.
Yeah, I'm tired and I'm hungry, so
You're always hungry.
that's true. But I'm also tired.
It's like
so
having what
it's
about
2
Bob
things.
living with you?
Hi, I'm Bob.
That's like him.
Reminds me of my favorite joke.
You should at least do something that could be a TikTok type thing.
Roses are red, violets are blue. I'm schizophrenic, and so am I.
Is that from that movie?
So, what about-
I mean, I think I've heard that joke before. That could have been a good TikTok moment right there, my friend.
Yeah, well,
We
now
need
it's supposed
some
to be time.
TikTok. Well, we need TikTok moments is what we need.
Favorite scene, of course, in that movie is when when Dreyfus is trying to wake him up in the morning and he's not. Bob, cock-a-doodle-doo.
Okay, see, I never watched it from start to finish. I've just seen all different parts of it. That movie, it's never really been my thing.
For those of you who really want to see Bill Murray at his funniest, I mean, listen, he's had a number
Stripes.
of movies. You got Stripes, you got Caddyshack, you've got Ghostbusters, you've got Groundhog Day. But I'm telling you, you have got to see What About Bob.
It is really good from that perspective.
It really is.
It is, but it's just so, and I love Richard.
I'm
Dreyfuss.
sailing.
Love Richard. But you basically are Bob. Like he comes over, he helps himself to the refrigerator, he walks in. He then wants to text my husband if he can eat certain food in the refrigerator.
Well, this is not a Bob situation. This is a Kramer situation.
It's that too.
Hey, Jason.
No, you always sound more like Banya when you do that. You're not getting the Kramer.
Gold, Jerry. Gold.
Ovaltine.
I want to have dinner at Mendy's.
Soup.
Soup is not a meal. I gave you an Armani suit. He gave you an Armani suit, Jerry.
The soup is the meal.
All right. No more chances now. This is the meal.
Sandwiches and a meal, Jerry.
It is not soup and a sandwich.
It's a meal.
Did you like the suit? Have you tried it on? Yeah, I slept in it last night. Thanks, Guy. Good to see you, brother. Thanks, Blue. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you, and we'll see you Wednesday.